My name's Tyrone Proctor. I'm an original soul trained dancer. I've been dancing professionally for about since 1973. My dance form of choice would be whacking. Whacking started on the West Coast in the early 70s by the gay community. It was done to disco music. The difference being between the East and West Coast is that the West Coast was primarily done with a lot of beats. The East Coast is done primarily with a lot of feeling. It was done in the 70s through till about the late 70s. I don't know what else to tell you about the dance, other than it's a dance that was based on three principles. It was based on the, how can I say, the music, which was primarily underground disco. And there's a difference between disco and underground disco. Disco would be the disco you would hear on the radio, which would be the YMCA. I'm not talking about that kind of disco. I'm talking about the underground disco, which would be Quartz, Beyond the Clouds, Voyage, things like that, Magic Bird of Fire, those things. Those were some of the major elements. The other major elements is that they picked up on the stars of the 40s, the movie stars of the 40s, such as Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, what's her name, Marilyn Monroe, and some of the other beauties that were then. What they did was they took the black and white photos where they were doing that, and the poses that they did, they recreated them. The other form was just the drag queen shows. They took what they saw the drag queens do on stage and they put it downstage. The music was generally, even though it was fast, they sped it up even faster. Some of the icons of the music would be Lamont Peterson, Arthur, Tinker, Andrew, Billy, Michelangelo. There are others like Gary Keys, John Pickett, Blinky, Mickey. It's a lot. It was popularized also in the straight community by lockers, and the lockers referred to it as a dance form called punking. Punking and whacking are basically the same thing. What punking is that punking is a straight person's version of the gay dance that you know as whacking. I'm ready for the questions. The only influence was the biggest influence would be the lockers. How can I say this? Or people that did lock. They saw the dance, they took the dance, and they made it their own. Other than that, there is no difference. It's easier for a locker to do whacking because some of the elements are the same, but it's a whole separate issue. What some of them did is they went in and they saw the dance and they redefined it for themselves. They did what they wanted to do to it. They took it and they modified it a little bit, changed it slightly. What people should do and what they shouldn't do in whacking. I think the first thing that people mistake whacking for is more dance, and it's a little bit more theater. So what they need to learn how to do is they need to learn how to control their bodies more. The other thing is the musicality of it. They have to learn the rhythm. They have to learn the timing. They have to learn how to move. They have to pay attention to the music. I always say, if you don't understand the music, you'll never understand the dance. Thank you. With this dance, it's really difficult to explain it to people because they'd have to see it and they'd have to see it done. But there's so many different versions of what's done and people don't understand what's happening. The way that I perceived the dance, the way that I did it in 73, 74, 75, was that I took it as just this. The dance, to be basic, you have to make people see what they hear. So if the beats are going bop, 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 then that's what you do. But you have to also have more control. The wrist action is about 85% there only because you can do a lot with your hands. Your hands have a lot of emotion in them. You can emote a lot of emotion with them. So we've used that. The arms are more or less your rhythm. Your body will, the whole center of your body will place you where you need to be. Most people, when they do it, they'll go boom, 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 boom. A lot of people will do this. This was only done in specific parts of the music. It just wasn't done haphazardly wherever you choose. You know, so people do it slightly different from the way they originally do it.
More active.
The way that whacking changed from its conception, from what I remember my first time going to a club and actually seeing them start doing something called posing, which was done to, I think it was Masterpiece, which went boom, 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 boom. And I walked in the club and I saw everybody go boom, 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 boom. Then, as me being on Soul Train, I noticed a gentleman by the name of Lamont Peterson would always use more arm and leg action. And from that, I think the word that I would use for it would be evolved. What also changed it is that the music, because we're talking about the early 70s, so back then it was more funk. But disco was underground. It was coming, and disco was only being played in certain clubs. So, as I said before, the three elements of the dance would be the music played a huge part in it. And what they did was, because they start going 12 inches, the music started going 12 inches, they would play it only in specific clubs. They wouldn't play it all over everywhere. They would play it in specific clubs. Now, when they played the music, naturally, movement went with it. So I'm just assuming that the movement that I've seen some people do, they start to apply it to that. And from there, it started evolving because you had more dancers do it, and the more dancers did it, the more different the dance became, and the more power moves you could draw out of it. Like, there were people that was specifically for their shoulders. There were specific people for their legs that would extend their legs from here all the way up and kick it. The one thumb of rule through all of this is that everything that they did was beat orientated. You had to be on the beat. If the beat went boom, 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 then that's where you went. You went boom, 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 boom. You also have to understand that when they made this music, some of the music was 17 minutes long and some of it was 24 minutes long. And you would know every inch, every instrument and every vocals that was being played through the whole song. And you could be able to interpret that through dance. The other thing was that in order to give it more power, eventually the DJ, and I would say the DJ in Geno's, who would happen to be Michelangelo, would go and speed the music up. In other words, beats are music is like beats per minute. Disco was maybe about I would say it would start somewhere at about 127 on up, and what they would do is they would speed it up. One of the reasons why they would speed it up is because to get the arms flowing, the faster the song was, the faster your arms would twirl. I also remember them going to clubs. We would go to clubs every Monday. There would be a different club. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We would go to clubs and we would dance in them. Some of these particular clubs that we would go in had a great understanding with the DJs and know the music, and they would play specific music, and that's the music that you would learn on. We were never to go into a dance studio back then. It was allowed, but it was only for commercial dancers or technically trained dancers. Street dancers were kind of banished from places like that. They were permitted, but they weren't welcome there. So what we had to do, we had to learn what we learned out in the street, literally. And learning things out in the street gives you a lot of strength, because you get in the club and you're subject to have to listen. You're forced to listen to the music. You're forced to become creative. Now you don't have to become creative because you're teaching the dance, and I guess students now feel that they just want to learn to dance, and the creativity is kind of watered down. But before, the dances that the students are learning now, they were created and they were built, and I use the word evolve because that's the best word that I could possibly give. Was other types of dance influenced by whacking? I am quite sure that all of that took a play. You have to understand, when you create with what you know and what you have, and you use your experience to make. So I'm sure that at some point, because when they were in the clubs, they were doing backflips, they were doing cartwheels. At some point, maybe in junior high school, maybe in elementary school, they were doing cartwheels. So what they knew, they start applying that. When they would sit there and they would watch movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and they would see how Marilyn would have her hands and how this would flow, they would apply all of that to the beat of the music. You know what I'm saying? Very important for people to realize that creativity plays an awful lot in all of this. And the best time for you to create is when you have freedom. That's the best time. That's the best time when it comes out. And you have a good when you have a good sense of center, when you have a good sense of who you are, then that's when you can create. And then that's when the creation comes out. And then you have followers that come and say, I like that, I want to do that. And then they embellish on what you've done. And for whacking, just like any other style of dance, it was no difference. You would see one person do one thing, and then the other person would gravitate to that. As I said before, just to make a long story short, to go back to the original question, you know, if you're in junior high school or high school and you've taken modern dance and you have stretch, or if you've taken karate, you will use those elements with what you know and apply it to what you're doing. And I'm quite sure that all of that took and played a huge part in whacking, because the lines were created. You know, when you start dealing with ballet, when you start dealing with the karate and all of that, that gives you what is it? What would you say?
Influence.
That would give you a. I just had the word in my head. That would give you discipline, so that you could create lines. And through those lines, if you were technically trained, it was real easy for you to hit them, because you would know how far to extend your arm. But for the laymen that were just coming in and watching this, they would duplicate this. Now, it may alter and change at the same part, but there are rules and regulations to everything. Thank you very much.